I'm Ava, 29, female, and for 3 years I was engaged to a man I thought was a loving widower. I've just discovered that not only is his wife very much alive, but he's been using my name to systematically destroy my financial future while dating a string of other women, all of us caught in the same devastating web of lies. The story of the man I loved, or the man I thought I loved, began on a rainy Tuesday at a coffee shop. I remember the rain because it was the kind that made you want to stay inside forever, wrapped in a blanket with a good book. I was a second-grade teacher, and my life was orderly, predictable, and quiet. Julian Vance, with his sad eyes and gentle smile, was a thunderclap in that quiet life. He told me he was a consultant, a job that kept him on the road, and his gaze held a deep, settled sadness that I found myself wanting to understand. On our third date, he told me about his wife, Lillian. It was a car accident, he said, his voice a low murmur that barely rose above the restaurant's chatter. 3 years ago, she was the love of my life. He didn't cry, but a single, perfect tear traced a path down his cheek, and he wiped it away with a practiced sort of haste, as if he were embarrassed by the display of emotion. My heart, the heart of a nurturing teacher who spent her days tending to scraped knees and hurt feelings, went out to him completely. I saw a broken man who needed healing, and I wanted to be the one to give it to him. Our relationship was built on the foundation of that tragedy. It explained everything. It explained why he never wanted to talk about his family, who he claimed were scattered and distant since Lillian's passing. It explained why he had no old friends in the city. He'd moved here for a fresh start, away from the ghosts of his past. His frequent business trips, which often lasted for a week or more, were part of his high-powered consulting job, but I also believed they were a way for him to escape the constant reminders of his loss. He was the perfect partner in every other way. When he was home, he was completely present. He'd help me grade papers, sitting at my kitchen table with a red pen and a look of intense concentration. He'd leave little notes on the bathroom mirror for me to find in the morning. "Have a great day, my love. Can't wait to see you." For my 28th birthday, he filled my tiny apartment with white lilies, telling me they were Lillian's favorite. "It feels right," he'd said, his eyes misty. "Like she's giving us her blessing." At the time, I found it profoundly romantic, a beautiful bridge between his past and our future. Now the memory makes me physically ill. My best friend Clara was never fully convinced. Clara, an accountant with a mind like a steel trap, was my opposite in every way. Where I was soft, she was sharp. Where I saw romance, she saw risk. "Doesn't it seem a little too perfect, Ava?" she asked me once, about a year into the relationship. The tragic widower, the high-flying job, no family to speak of, it's like he was written in a novel. I defended him fiercely. "You don't see him when he's vulnerable," I argued. "You don't see the way he still flinches when a car backfires. You're just being cynical." One specific memory stands out. We were supposed to go to my parents' 30th anniversary party. It was a big deal, and I was excited for them to spend more time with the man I was going to marry. The morning of the party, Julian was uncharacteristically quiet. He was standing by the bookshelf holding an empty silver picture frame. When I asked him what was wrong, he said, "This was the frame I had a picture of Lillian in. I had to put it away. Sometimes. Sometimes it just hits me all over again. I don't think I can do a party today, Ava. I'm sorry, I just need to be alone." I was disappointed, of course, but my heart ached for him. I kissed his forehead, told him I understood, and went to my parents' party alone, making excuses for my grieving fiancé. I spent the evening defending his absence, painting him as a sensitive, wounded soul. My mother, a romantic herself, sighed and said, "That poor man, you take good care of him, honey." I promised that I would. I felt a surge of protective love for him, this man who carried such a heavy burden. I was his safe harbor, his calm after the storm. He proposed 6 months later on the anniversary of the day we met, in that same coffee shop. He got down on one knee, presenting a beautiful, simple diamond ring. His speech was about how I had taught him to live again, how I had filled the emptiness Lillian had left behind. He called me his sunrise. And through my own tears of joy, I said yes, completely unaware that every word he spoke was a lie, every memory we'd built was a fraud, and the foundation of our entire life together was nothing more than quicksand. The real storm hadn't even begun, and it was heading directly for me. Life with my fiancé, Julian, continued its is full course for another year. We were in the thick of wedding planning, a small, intimate ceremony just as he wanted. He said a large celebration would feel like a betrayal to Lillian's memory, and I, ever the understanding partner, readily agreed. My life felt full and complete. I had my second graders who filled my days with laughter and crayon drawings, and I had Julian who filled my heart with a love I thought was epic. The first crack in that perfect facade appeared on a Thursday afternoon. It arrived in a stiff, cream-colored envelope delivered by a mail carrier who needed my signature. The return address was for the corporate headquarters of a major national bank I had never dealt with. My own finances were simple: a checking account, a savings account, and one credit card with a modest limit that I paid off every month. I was a teacher. My financial world was small and meticulously managed. Inside, the letter was addressed to me, Ava Collins, but it referenced a delinquent business loan account and a staggering sum, $50,000. It spoke of missed payments, escalating interest, and the imminent risk of default proceedings. The letter stated that the loan was taken out 8 months prior to fund a new enterprise, Vance Innovative Solutions, LLC, Vance. The name hit me like a physical blow. My first thought was that it was a mistake, a typo, identity theft by a stranger. It simply couldn't be real. Julian was a consultant for a huge international firm, not the owner of some small LLC I'd never heard of. I read the letter 3 times, my hands beginning to tremble. They had my full name, my address, and as I saw in the fine print at the bottom, my social security number. Panic began to bubble in my chest, hot and sharp. I called Julian immediately. He was on one of his business trips, this time supposedly in Chicago. The phone rang and rang before finally going to voicemail. "Hi, you've reached Julian, leave a message." His smooth, confident voice, which usually soothed me, now sent a spike of anxiety through my system. "Julian, it's me," I said, my voice unsteady. "I got a really weird letter from a bank, a very scary letter. It says I took out a $50,000 business loan. It has to be some kind of fraud. Please call me as soon as you get this." I paced my small living room, the letter clutched in my hand. My mind was racing, trying to find a logical explanation. Maybe a criminal had somehow gotten both our details and merged them. It seemed far-fetched. While I waited for his call, I knew there was only one person who could help me make sense of it. I dialed Clara. "Clara, something terrible has happened," I said the moment she picked up. I explained the letter, my voice cracking. Clara was silent for a moment, and it was a heavy, unnerving silence. "Ava," she said finally, her tone stripped of its usual sarcasm and replaced with grim seriousness. "I need you to do exactly as I say. Do you have the letter with you?" "Oh, yes, it's right here." "It's okay, we need to pull your credit report, all 3 bureaus. Right now, I'm going to walk you through it. Open your laptop." For the next 20 minutes, Clara guided me through the security questions and identity verifications of the credit bureau websites. As the first report loaded, my stomach twisted into a painful knot. I scrolled down past my familiar student loan records and my one credit card, and then I saw them. It wasn't just the business loan, it was a list, a horrifying, impossible list. There were 4 credit cards I had never seen before, one from a luxury department store maxed out at $15,000, another from a high-end electronics retailer with a balance of $8,000. $2 more were general-purpose cards, both carrying balances that made me feel faint. In total, not including the business loan, there was over $40,000 of debt attached to my name, all opened within the last 2 years. "Oh my God," I whispered, my hand flying to my mouth. "Clara, what is this?" "When were the cards opened?" she asked, her voice tense. I read the dates to her. They all seemed to correspond with times Julian had been away on business. A cold dread, colder than anything I had ever felt, began to seep into my bones. "This is identity theft, Ava," Clara said firmly. "A bad case of it. We need to freeze your credit immediately and start calling these companies." But my mind was stuck on one thing: Vance Innovative Solutions, LLC. "Clara," I said slowly, "the business loan, it has Julian's last name." "It could be a coincidence," she said, but her voice lacked conviction. "A very strange coincidence." He hasn't called me back, I said, checking my phone for the 10th time. Nothing. He's probably in a meeting, she offered, trying to sound reassuring. But I wasn't reassured. The image of Julian holding that empty picture frame flashed in my mind. The man who was too grief-stricken to attend a family party. The man who need. Led me to heal him. A new, terrible thought began to form, an idea so monstrous that I could barely allow it to surface. What if the grief was a lie? What if the man I was protecting was the one I needed protection from? Clara, I asked, my voice barely a whisper, how would someone get my social security number? It would have to be someone close to you, Ava, she replied gently. Someone with access to your files, your mail, someone you trust completely. The words hung in the air between us, someone I trust completely. The foundation of my perfect life didn't just have a crack in it, it was starting to crumble into dust. As I stared at the list of fraudulent accounts on my screen, I had a sudden, insane impulse. My fingers moved to the search bar almost of their own accord. I typed in two words I had never thought to combine before. A Julian Vance marriage record. I clicked search. The screen refreshed, and the first result from a public records database in a neighboring state made the world drop out from under my feet. VANCE, Julian M. married to VANCE, Maria E. on October 12, 2015. Status, active. The word active pulsed on the screen. It felt like a digital heartbeat mocking the frantic, irregular rhythm of my own. Julian, my Julian, the man who wept for his dead wife Lillian, was married. He was currently, legally, and actively married to a woman named Maria. For a long time, I just stared. My brain refused to process the information. It was like trying to solve an equation where none of the numbers made sense. 2 plus 2 was suddenly equaling 17. A widower cannot have a living wife. My fiancé cannot be someone else's husband. These were fundamental truths, and the screen in front of me was telling me they were all lies. Ava, are you still there? Clara's voice crackled through the phone, pulling me back from the edge of a silent abyss. He's married, Clara, I said, my voice flat and devoid of emotion. I was too shocked to cry. His wife's name is Maria. They were married in 2015. The record is active. There was a sharp intake of breath on the other end of the line. Okay, Clara said, her voice shifting into full crisis management mode. Okay, Ava, listen to me. Do not call him. Do not text him. Do not do anything until we know exactly what we're dealing with. This has now moved from identity theft into something much, much worse. But my mind was already spinning, recontextualizing every memory I had of Julian. The business trips weren't business trips. They were trips home to his wife, the sudden calls he couldn't take because he was in a meeting with clients, the weekends he was unreachable because he was in a remote area with bad service. It was all a lie. I wasn't his safe harbor. I was his vacation home. I was his other life. A wave of nausea washed over me, so intense I had to grip the edge of my desk, the white lilies. He filled my apartment with his wife's favorite flower, or maybe Lillian's, or maybe he told us both the same story. Who was Lillian? Did she ever even exist? Was she just a character in the novel Clara had accused him of living in? A ghost conjured up to manipulate and deceive me. What do? I whispered, feeling helpless and small. We dig, Clara said, her voice hard as diamonds. We find out who this man really is. You said the marriage record was from a neighboring state. I confirmed the state. It was only a 3-hour drive away. He had always told me his company's regional headquarters were there. It was all so neat, so tidy, so perfectly constructed. I'm going to do some digging on Maria Vance, Clara said. I want you to do something that's going to hurt, but you have to do it. I want you to go through his social media. Not his page, his is locked down tight, I've checked before. I want you to search his name and see who has tagged him. Look for public photos, comments, anything. The idea of searching for more proof felt like willingly touching a hot stove, but I knew she was right. I needed to see the whole picture no matter how ugly. I spent the next hour scrolling through years of tagged photos. Most were from corporate events, just as he'd told me. But then I found a public profile belonging to a woman named Sienna. Her page was a curated collection of yoga poses on sunny beaches and inspirational quotes overlaid on sunsets. And there, posted just 3 weeks ago, was a picture of her and Julian. They were sitting at an outdoor cafe, their heads closed together, smiling at the camera. He was wearing the blue linen shirt I had bought him for his last birthday. Sienna's arm was linked through his, her hand resting possessively on his arm. The caption read, "Another amazing weekend with my favorite person. So grateful for this man." My breath hitched. The date on the post was from a weekend Julian had told me he was at a mandatory corporate retreat in the mountains. I scrolled through her feed, my heart pounding a sick, heavy rhythm against my ribs. There were more pictures, a selfie of the two of them at a concert, a picture of his hand holding hers, the silver ring he always wore, a ring he'd told me was his late father's, clearly visible. I felt a bizarre sense of detachment, as if I were watching a movie about someone else's life. This couldn't be me. I was Ava Collins, a second-grade teacher. I baked cookies for my students and graded spelling tests on Friday nights. I didn't get involved with married con artists who had secret girlfriends. My fingers, moving with a will of their own, navigated to the message button on Sienna's profile. What was I even going to say? "Hi, the man you think is your amazing favorite person is also my fiancé and also, it turns out, married to someone else entirely." I typed out a simple, terrifying message. "Hi, Sienna, my name is Ava. I know this is going to sound crazy, but I think we need to talk about Julian Vance." I hit send before I could lose my nerve. To my shock, she replied almost instantly. "Who is this? How do you know Julian?" My heart hammered. "He's my fiancé." The three dots indicating she was typing appeared and disappeared several times. Finally, a message came through. "That's not possible. He told me he was divorced. We've been seeing each other for 6 months." Divorced? He'd told me he was a widower. He'd told this woman he was divorced. He was tailoring his lies to fit his audience. My messages with Sienna over the next hour were a rapid-fire exchange of chilling details. He told her he was a consultant, too. He told her he couldn't introduce her to his family because they'd sided with his crazy ex-wife in the divorce and were bitter. He'd taken her to the same Italian restaurant he called our spot with me. He'd bought her white lilies, telling her they symbolized a pure new beginning. Every message from Sienna was another nail in the coffin of the life I thought I had. We were members of a club neither of us had asked to join. We were just two of the women duped by Julian Vance. And as this horrifying realization settled in, a new, even scarier question emerged. If he was married to Maria, engaged to me, and dating Sienna, how many others were there? Just as I was typing that question to Sienna, an email notification popped up on my screen. It was from Clara. The subject line was just one word: Maria. I clicked it open. The email contained a link to a news article from a local paper in the town where Maria Vance lived. It was a human interest story from 2 years ago about a community fundraiser. I scanned the article and then I saw it. A picture of a smiling woman with kind eyes standing next to a table laden with baked goods. The caption underneath read, "Maria Vance, organizing a fundraiser to help pay for her husband Julian's mounting medical bills from his recent cancer treatment." Cancer treatment, not a corporate retreat, not a business trip, cancer. The lies were deeper, darker, and more complex than I could ever have imagined. He wasn't just a cheat, he wasn't just a thief, he was a monster, and I was engaged to him. The news article felt like the final, definitive piece of a puzzle I never wanted to solve. Julian hadn't been on business trips, he hadn't been visiting his wife, Maria, he had been sick, he had cancer, and Maria, his wife, had been by his side, raising money to save his life. The same man who was supposedly grieving one wife was actively deceiving another while she fought for his survival. The sheer depravity of it was staggering. My conversation with Sienna had ended with a shared sense of shock and disgust. We exchanged phone numbers, promising to stay in touch. She was heartbroken, but her pain was fresh, measured in months. My own was a deep, festering wound 3 years in the making. Every "I love you," every tender moment, every shared dream was now tainted, revealed as a calculated move in a long and despicable game. Clara called me back. "Did you see it?" she asked, her voice grim. I saw it, I said, my voice hollow. He had cancer, Clara. He told me he was in Chicago last week. Sienna thought he was at a concert with her, but he was probably getting a PET scan, and Maria, that poor woman, she was trying to save him. We don't know that he's still sick, Ava, Clara cautioned. The article is 2 years old, but it proves one thing beyond any doubt: Maria is a victim here just like you. An idea began to form in my mind, a terrifying and necessary step. I have to talk to her, I said. I have to talk to Maria. Are you sure you're ready for that? No, I admitted honestly, but I have to. She deserves to know. We all deserve the truth. Clara, being Clara, had already found a phone number for a Maria Vance in the right town. For an hour, I stared at the number on my screen. My thumb hovered over the call button, my entire body trembling. This call would make it all irrevocable. Bly real. As long as Maria was just a name on a screen, I could maintain a sliver of denial. But her voice would be the sound of my old life shattering completely. Taking a deep, ragged breath, I pressed call. It rang 3 times. A woman answered, her voice wary. Hello. Is this Maria Vance? I asked, my own voice sounding strange and distant. Who's asking? She replied, her tone immediately defensive. My name is Ava Collins. I know you don't know me, but I need to talk to you about your husband, Julian. There was a sharp, hostile silence. Then she said, Oh, I know exactly who you are. You're the one from the city, the one who won't leave him alone. Julian has told me all about you. You're his stalker. The word hit me with the force of a physical slap. Stalker. He hadn't just erased me from his real life, he had recast me as the villain. I was the crazy ex-girlfriend, the obsessive woman who couldn't let go. It was a masterful, cruel stroke. It insulated him completely, ensuring that if I ever did try to make contact, I would be dismissed as unhinged. No, I said, my voice shaking with a sudden surge of adrenaline. No, that's not who I am. That is the story he is telling you, but it is a lie. For the last 3 years, Julian has been telling me that his wife died in a car accident. He told me her name was Lillian. He and I were engaged. We're supposed to be getting married in August. I heard a small, choked sound on the other end of the line. It was a sound of disbelief, of a carefully constructed reality beginning to fracture. That's not possible, Maria stammered. Look at my social media, I urged her, my voice gaining strength. Look at my pictures. He's been living with me. He told me he travels for work, but he was living a double life. And Maria, it's not just me. He's been stealing from me. He took out loans and credit cards in my name. He's destroyed my finances. I told her everything about the $50,000 business loan for Vance Innovative Solutions, about the maxed out credit cards, about Sienna, the woman he was dating while supposedly on business trips. I laid out the whole sordid tapestry of his deceit. For a long time, Maria was silent. I could hear her quiet, ragged breathing. When she finally spoke, her voice was a broken whisper. The business, she said. He told me his consulting firm was struggling. He said he needed capital to keep it afloat. I emptied my savings account for him. I took out a second mortgage on our house. He said it was an investment in our future. Her pain mirrored my own, but it was deeper, rooted in more years and shared history. The fundraiser, the cancer, it was all real to her. The cancer, I started, my voice gentle. The article said he was sick. She let out a sound that was half sob, half laugh. He is, she said. He's in remission. He has checkups every 3 months. He always tells me he has to go out of town for a conference on those weeks. He said he didn't want to worry me by going to the local hospital. Her voice broke. He's been using his own illness as an excuse to see you. The monstrosity of it left me speechless. He had weaponized his own cancer. He had used her love and my sympathy as his shield and his alibi. And the money I raised, she continued, her voice hardening with a new, cold anger. The money our friends and family gave us. He said it all went to medical bills that insurance wouldn't cover. But now, oh God, where did that money go? We both knew the answer. It went to funding his double life. It paid for dinner with me, concerts with Sienna, and who knows what else with who knows who else. We were all in our own way, being financed by the generosity of a community that thought they were helping a sick man. By the end of the call, Maria and I were no longer strangers. We were allies, bonded by the shared trauma of being loved by a phantom. Her defensiveness had melted away, replaced by a steely resolve that matched my own. "He's supposed to be coming home this weekend," she said, her voice dangerously calm. "He thinks he's coming home to his loving, clueless wife." "He told me he had to go to a team-building retreat in the mountains," I said, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. "He's supposed to be back on Sunday night. He'll come straight to my apartment." An idea sparked between us, a silent mutual understanding that passed across the phone lines. We were the two main pillars of his fraudulent life, and together we could bring the entire structure crashing down. "What if," I began, "when he comes to my apartment on Sunday, you're there with me?" Maria didn't hesitate. "I'll be there," she said. "And I'm going to make a few calls. I have a feeling you and Sienna aren't the only ones. He joined a survivors support group a year ago. I think it's time I talked to some of the other wives." We hung up, and for the first time in days, I didn't feel like a victim. I felt the first stirrings of a cold, righteous fury. The phantom had a name, the ghost had a face, and he was about to walk into a room full of the women he had tried to destroy. His reckoning was coming. The 3 days between the phone call with Maria and Julian's scheduled return were the longest of my life. My apartment, once a sanctuary of love and comfort, felt like a movie set, a backdrop for a life that had never been real. Every object held a false memory. The coffee mug he favored, the throw blanket he'd pull over us on the couch, the spot by the window where he'd stand while taking work calls, it was all part of the performance. I felt an overwhelming urge to pack it all into boxes and leave it on the curb, to erase every trace of him. But I couldn't. I needed the stage to be perfectly set for the final act. I went to work on Friday, moving through my day like an automaton. I helped my second graders with their math worksheets, I refereed a dispute over a red crayon, and I read a story about a friendly bear. The simple, innocent world of my classroom was a stark contrast to the darkness that had enveloped my personal life. One of my students, a little girl named Lily, gave me a drawing she'd made. "It's you, Ms. Collins," she said proudly, pointing to a smiling stick figure with wild brown hair. I nearly broke down right there. These children, with their trusting hearts and uncomplicated views of the world, were a painful reminder of the person I used to be before Julian. Clara was my rock. She came over every evening bringing takeout and a fierce, protective energy that felt like a shield. We spent hours on the phone with fraud departments, reporting the stolen cards and the bogus loan. Each call was a humiliating ordeal. I had to repeat the story over and over, admitting to a faceless voice on the other end of the line that my own fiancé had betrayed me. Yes, he had access to my personal documents. No, I had no idea. Each admission felt like a small death, the chipping away of my competence, my intelligence, my self-worth. "This is not your fault, Ava," Clara said for the 100th time as I hung up from a particularly grueling call with a credit card company. "These men are predators. They are experts at finding good people and exploiting their trust. His crimes are not a reflection of your character, they are a reflection of his." I knew she was right logically. But in the quiet moments when Clara was gone and the apartment was silent, the shame was a physical weight. How could I have been so blind? For 3 years, he had looked me in the eyes and lied. He had held me, slept next to me, planned a future with me, all while living a completely separate life. The intimacy I had cherished was a violation. Meanwhile, Maria was on a mission. She called me Saturday morning, her voice a low, steady hum of controlled rage. "I spoke to 2 other women from the support group," she said. "It's the same pattern. Julian befriends the husband, a fellow cancer survivor. Then he gets close to the wife, feeding her a story about how his own wife, Lillian, didn't understand his struggle. He becomes her confidant, a shoulder to cry on." My blood ran cold. He wasn't just a romantic con artist. He was a parasite who fed on trauma. He sought out vulnerable people in their darkest moments and used their pain for his own gain. "Is he with them?" I asked, almost afraid of the answer. "Not yet," Maria said, "but he was laying the groundwork, flirtatious texts, gifts, he was grooming them. They both said he mentioned needing a small loan to get through a tough spot until a big consulting check came in. We also found out where the money from the community fundraiser went. Maria, using the excuse of organizing their financial records, found statements for a secret bank account Julian held. The donations had been deposited there and then immediately funneled out to pay for things like a down payment on a luxury car, expensive dinners, and cash withdrawals in my city. He had stolen the charity of their community to fund his deceptions. Sienna, the yoga instructor, agreed to be part of our plan. She was hurt and angry, and she wanted to face him. Maria had also convinced one of the women from the support group, a quiet woman named Bate, to come. Bate's husband was still very ill, and the thought that Julian had tried to exploit her family's suffering had ignited a fire in her. Our plan was simple. Julian was due at my apartment around 7 p.m. on Sunday. I would be there waiting for him. Maria, Sienna, and Bate would be in my bedroom with the door slightly ajar, listening. I would confront him alone first. I needed that. I needed to see his face, to hear the lies one last time before the trap was sprung. Clara would be waiting in her car down the street, ready to call the police the moment I gave the signal, a text message with a single word. Now. On Sunday evening, my apartment was unnaturally clean and still. I had spent the day purging every trace of my personal feelings, leaving only a cold, hard resolve. I laid out the evidence on my coffee table, the bank letter about the $50,000 loan, printouts of the fraudulent credit card statements, a copy of his marriage license to Maria, and a screenshot of his picture with Sienna. It was a mosaic of his betrayal. At 6:30 p.m., Maria, Sienna, and Bate arrived. Seeing them in person was surreal. We were a strange sorority brought together by the worst kind of betrayal. Maria was stoic and strong, her eyes filled with a pain that seemed ancient. Sienna was visibly trembling, a mixture of fear and fury. Bate was silent, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, but her presence felt incredibly powerful. We huddled in my kitchen, speaking in whispers. There were no tears. The time for crying was over. This was about justice. At 6:55 p.m., they slipped into my bedroom, leaving the door open just a crack. I took my position on the couch, my heart a trapped bird beating against my ribs. I smoothed my dress, took a sip of water, and waited. At precisely 7:02 p.m., I heard his key in the lock. The doorknob turned. The phantom was about to walk onto the stage. The click of the lock turning was the loudest sound I had ever heard. The door swung open, and there he was, Julian. He looked tired from his trip, but he broke into that familiar, heart-stopping smile the moment he saw me. It was the same smile that had disarmed me in the coffee shop 3 years ago. Now it looked like a mask. "There's my girl," he said, dropping his travel bag by the door. He moved toward me to kiss me, but I shifted on the couch, and he stopped, his smile faltering slightly. "Everything okay, honey?" "We need to talk, Julian," I said. My voice was surprisingly steady. I had practiced this moment in my head 100 times, and my anger had burned away the fear. He looked puzzled. He glanced around the room, his eyes scanning for anything out of place. "Okay," he said slowly, sitting in the armchair opposite me. "Sounds serious, what's up?" I didn't say anything. I simply reached forward and pushed the papers on the coffee table toward him. He looked down. I watched his face as he processed what he was seeing. I saw his eyes move from the bank letter to the credit card statements. I saw a flicker of confusion, then a flash of panic, quickly suppressed. When he saw the copy of his marriage license, his face went pale. And then he saw the picture of himself with Sienna. He looked up at me, and for the first time, the charming mask was gone. I was looking at the real Julian. His expression was cold, calculating. "Ava, I can explain," he began, his voice taking on a smooth, placating tone. It was the voice he used when he was trying to manipulate someone. "Can you?" I asked, my voice dripping with ice. "Can you explain Vance Innovative Solutions? Can you explain the $50,000 you stole from me? Can you explain the cards, the debt? Can you explain your wife, Maria?" He flinched at her name. "It's complicated," he said, leaning forward, trying to sell me one last lie. "Maria and we've been separated for years. The divorce was just never finalized, a paperwork thing. It's meaningless." "A paperwork thing?" I laughed, a bitter, humorless sound. "She took out a second mortgage on your home to pay for your business. She organized fundraisers to pay for your cancer treatments. Does that sound meaningless to you?" His eyes widened. He hadn't expected me to know that. He was scrambling, his mind racing to plug the holes in his sinking ship. How did you? You spoke to her? Ava, honey, you can't believe anything she says. She's unstable. That's why we separated. She gets these delusions. It was breathtaking. The ease with which he tried to paint his devoted wife as mentally ill was the most evil thing I had ever witnessed. He was trying to use the very lie he'd told Maria about me on me. And Sienna, I asked, tapping the photo. Is she a delusion too, or is she just another paperwork thing? That was a work colleague, he insisted, his voice rising. You're twisting things, you've been spying on me going through my things, what is wrong with you? The gaslighting was textbook. He was turning it all around, casting me as the villain, the paranoid, prying girlfriend. 3 days ago, it might have worked. I might have questioned myself, wondered if I was overreacting, but not anymore. What is wrong with me? I repeated, my voice dangerously low. I believed you, I loved you, I mourned your dead wife, Lillian, a woman who never even existed. I defended you to my friends and family. I was planning to marry you. I let you into my life, my home, my heart, and you were a complete fraud. You are a parasite, Julian. You feed on the goodness and trust of others because there is nothing but a black hole inside of you. He stared at me, his mouth sly. GHTLY agape, he had no response. For the first time, he was speechless. You know, I continued, a cold calm settling over me. I was trying to understand what kind of person could do this. And I realized you don't just have multiple lives, you have multiple audiences. You tailor the story to fit whoever you're trying to con. For me, you were the tragic widower. For Sienna, the handsome divorcee. And for your wife, you were the struggling husband, the brave cancer survivor. You know, it's funny. I think it's time your different audiences finally got to meet. On that cue, the bedroom door swung open. Maria stepped out first, her face a mask of cold fury. Then came Sienna, her arms crossed, her eyes blazing. And finally, quiet bait from the support group who just stood there, her silent presence a powerful condemnation. Julian's head snapped toward them. The color drained completely from his face. He looked like a cornered animal. He stared from Maria to Sienna to bait and then back to me. The intricate web of his lies, so carefully compartmentalized, had just converged in one single, inescapable room. He opened his mouth, but no sound came out. Hello, Julian, Maria said, her voice ringing with clarity and strength. It seems we have a lot to talk about, the business, the medical bills, the other women. Julian shot to his feet, his eyes wild with panic. This is a setup, you're all crazy, he yelled, backing toward the door. You're all in on it together. We are, I said, standing up to face him. The people you tried to isolate and turn against each other, we found each other, your game is over. I raised my phone and typed the single word to Clara, now. Julian reached for the doorknob, desperate to escape. You'll never prove any of this, he spat, his voice trembling with rage. We don't have to, Maria said calmly. We've already given everything to the police. The bank statements, the forged loan documents, the sworn affidavits from all of us, they're on their way. As if on cue, we heard the sound of sirens growing louder in the distance. Julian froze, his hand on the doorknob. The blood pounding in my ears was louder than the sirens. He turned to look at me one last time, his face a maelstrom of shock, hatred, and disbelief. In his eyes, I finally saw him for what he was, not a monster of impossible complexity, but a small, pathetic man whose bag of tricks had just run out. The fight was over, all that was left was the fallout. The arrival of the police was swift and efficient. 2 uniformed officers entered the apartment, their presence making the surreal situation starkly official. Julian, who had been frozen by the sound of the sirens, seemed to crumble. The fight went out of him, replaced by a sullen, petulant silence. He didn't look at any of us as they handcuffed him and read him his rights. He refused to make eye contact, his gaze fixed on the floor as if he could will himself to disappear through it. Watching them lead him out of my apartment, the man I had once planned to spend my life with, I felt not sadness, but a profound and overwhelming sense of relief. It was the feeling of a crushing weight being lifted. In the hours and days that followed, my apartment became a command center. Clara managed the legal and financial logistics with the precision of a field general. Maria, who had decided to stay in the city for a few days, became the emotional anchor for our small, broken group. Sienna and Bate were there too. We spent hours talking, sharing our stories, piecing together the full timeline of Julian's betrayals. We cried, yes, but we also found moments to laugh, bitter, ironic laughs at the sheer audacity of his lies. We had all been cast as rivals in his twisted narrative, but in reality, we were his survivors. We found a strange, fierce comfort in our shared experience. The legal process was a marathon, not a sprint. Julian was charged with multiple counts of fraud, identity theft, and grand larceny. Maria filed for divorce, her proceedings made infinitely more complicated by the web of debt he had woven around them. The financial mess he left in my life took nearly a year to untangle. It was a humiliating process of proving my own innocence, of fighting with credit bureaus and banks to reclaim my name. There were times when the sheer scale of the bureaucratic nightmare felt designed to make me give up. But I didn't. Every form I filled out, every call I made was an act of taking my life back. Clara was my savior. She sat with me for every phone call, she helped me draft every letter, and she celebrated every small victory, a fraudulent charge removed, a bogus account closed. "We will fix this, Ava," she would say with unshakable confidence, one piece at a time. My relationship with Maria blossomed into a true friendship. We were from different worlds, a small-town homemaker and a city school teacher, but our bond was forged in fire. We spoke on the phone every week, supporting each other through the slow, grinding wheels of justice. We had been the two poles of his deceitful world, the wife and the fiancé, and in his absence, we found in each other a profound understanding that no one else could offer. Healing wasn't a straight line. There were days when a song on the radio or the sight of white lilies in a flower shop would send a jolt of pain through me. The trust I once gave so freely was shattered. I became more guarded, more skeptical. The world, which had once seemed fundamentally good, now held a lurking darkness I couldn't unsee. But slowly, day by day, I began to reclaim myself. I poured my energy into my classroom, finding solace in the bright, uncomplicated world of my students. Their hugs, their funny stories, and their unconditional affection were a powerful antidote to the poison Julian had left behind. They reminded me of the Ava I was before him, the nurturing, kind, and open-hearted person he had targeted. I realized he hadn't destroyed that person, he had only hidden her for a while. About a year after Julian's arrest, I was in my classroom after school, cleaning paintbrushes, when my old life and new life converged. Lily, the little girl who had drawn the stick figure picture of me, ran back into the room. She had forgotten her lunchbox. She gave me a quick hug. "You're the best teacher, Ms. Collins," she said. "And you're the best student, Lily," I replied, smiling. As she ran out, I looked around my classroom, at the colorful artwork taped to the walls, the mismatched chairs, the shelves overflowing with books. This was my life, this was real, the love here was genuine, the trust was earned and reciprocated. My world wasn't the small, quiet place it had been before Julian. It was larger now, filled with the fierce loyalty of friends like Clara, the unexpected strength of allies like Maria, and the daily joys of my work. The pain had carved new depths into me, but it had not broken me. Julian was eventually sentenced to several years in prison. The justice system did its work, but my real victory wasn't seeing him behind bars. It was standing in my own life, free of his influence, with my head held high. I had been engaged to a phantom, a man made of smoke and mirrors, but in his wake, I found something infinitely more real and powerful: myself. So, to anyone listening who might be in a situation that feels dark or hopeless, know this: the truth has a power that no lie can withstand. The light you need to find your way out is not in someone else, it is within you. Trust that light, trust your own strength. You are more resilient than you can possibly imagine.